Dude, you are getting well. Dude.
Oh, hello.
Oh, hello. Good to see you.
Yeah,
Ladies
you
and
too.
gentlemen, this is Dave Hill. He's a comedian, musician, and author. And I met him through the infamous musician Danny Fingers.
Oh,
It's
infamous. I didn't
about
know he was infamous.
about 10 years ago, I believe. And we've got to reunite here. So, Dave, welcome to the show. I'm so grateful to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
It is an honor and a pleasure. So, what had you say yes to being here today?
Oh, I like you and I like
Oh,
talking. So I was like, well, and then, I'm always happy to talk about mental health
hmm.
or lack thereof even. Um,
Yes.
so there we go. There's three reasons.
Lovely. Well, I like you too. I've always, since the moment I met you, I really enjoyed being in your presence. And I
Oh,
really
thank you.
didn't know much about you when we met. I knew that Danny was a fan and loved your comedy. And I met Danny Fingers through stand up and comedy and music in Los Angeles, like 20 years ago in a deep dark hole when I was not mentally well at all. And it's brought us all here today. So I'm so grateful that you're talking about these things. I think we can't talk about mental health enough right now, especially as the holidays are coming up, the trifecta of stressors between Thanksgiving and the Christmas, Hanukkah time and the New Year.
Hmm.
Um, so it's really cool to see you. And for those who don't know, also Dave and I got to our when I was in this band Danny Fingers and the Thumbs, we got to open for Valley Lodge, which is your band. Are they
Hmm.
still active?
Yeah, yeah, we're making a
Right
new
on.
record now. I mean, we're never that active. We just kind of keep. I think the key to our survival. I apologize. I'm just sort of monitoring multiple things I can explain as part of our conversation.
Sure.
Um, and But yeah, Valley Lodge is we are making a new record now, but we don't play. We've never been very play live very often, and we haven't
Hmm.
played live now in almost 3 years.
Yeah.
I can't remember why, but no,
We're playing
pandemic
in New York
obviously.
City. Our band Dirty May, who I now playing with my wife for the last 6 years, 7 years. We're playing in New York City for the first time in 3 years, and we couldn't remember why we haven't either.
Yeah, yeah. There's
I
a
mean, there's
whole
that
like,
pandemic thing, and
oh, that, yeah, 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 yeah. Now it's coming to me.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, yeah, but Valley Lodge, it's pretty, very don't play it live. I think that's the key to a band's longevity is to not do that much ever. But we just make records every few years, and that's really I like that sort of more anyway as recording. I I like playing live, but I do it so much as a comedian that for me to sing in a band is like in a way I like it, but I'm also like, oh gosh, I really don't need to be the center of attention because I'm already going on stage so much. So I kind of have more fun like playing guitar with other people.
hmm, that's
Um,
cool.
because I'm just like, oh, I'm just over here. They can sing and talk and do all that stuff. So,
Yeah, that's so interesting to hear. 'Cause, and I think I can relate to that. I remember when I used to be a professional magician, and
oh wow,
yeah, and once the Dell thing started, I mean, if you tell someone you're a magician, their first thing is oh well, show me a trick, like
sure,
do some magic, perform for me. And I really, especially once the Dell thing took off, was not feeling like performing on command, and so I just stopped telling people for like 20 years, and now
yeah,
I'll surprise people. But I can understand a little bit of that, like kind of crawling in really enjoying your time, your downtime. But I can imagine also there's a side of it too for people who would give anything to spend more time being in the spotlight and being seen and receiving that validation and all of that. So, is that has there ever been a time? Well, have you always? Why do you think you became a comedian?
It was kind of accidental. I never really planned on it. Like it wasn't like I grew up thinking like, oh, I want to do that. Uh, I never. I mean, there's comedians I always liked, growing up, but I didn't think of it as something I would ever do. And then I think playing in bands, I started liking talking in between songs, and
Yeah.
and it, and then I was writing, you know, like newspaper articles, and I would try to slip jokes in, however inappropriately, and so I knew I liked writing jokes. And then I started writing for television. I sort of accidentally uh, became a performer out of it, because just opportunities started coming along, and it was just sort of very organic and fun. Because I think I mean, I try to like remember this, and it sort of almost made now. Then it kind of happened with music, is where when I started comedy, I had no aspirations, so it was just all fun, and anything that happened was like, oh, that's cool, but I didn't care. So it kind of grew very organically and was super fun. And then suddenly I was like, oh, this is my job. And meanwhile, like for years, I'd been playing in bands and had some success. Like I had a band out of college. We got a record deal and we're on the radio and MTV. But it was never easy, and that was just like a little blip. And that band broke up, and then tried to form another band and blah, blah. It's just kind of, but then once comedy became my job, I kept making music. And then music has always, ever since, just been fun and effortless, because I can't say it's good. That's very subjective, whether or not any of my music is good. But, uh, we've had some nice experience and had nice things happen. Like, Valley Lodge, one of the songs is the theme to the John Oliver show, which is cool. Um,
That's great. Yeah, that's really cool. How did that come about?
that was, I think, probably through comedy in a way, because,
Mhm.
I knew John. I've never asked them, honestly. Like, I think it was just, well, I mean, I vaguely know. Like, I'm friends with Liz Stanton, who's like the executive producer of the show, and I had worked with her before, and I knew John. So I think it was just amazing luck that they were probably like, "What do we do for a theme song?" And fortunately, I guess one of them must have been like, "Oh, let's see what if Dave's got anything." So they just
That's great.
emailed one day and said, um, "Hey, no, 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 no. I'm sorry. There's a lot of action happening. Lucy, stay down, lie down." For the
The dog
listener,
recovering
my
from.
dog had knee surgery, and two cars are pulling into the driveway, and she's jumping up. She's not supposed to do.
It's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
It's all
Lucy,
good.
move.
And we could edit out anything
Oh,
too.
you can
But
edit out this. I
yeah,
forgot
but
about
this is
editing.
probably the
Lucy,
best
no, no, no,
part.
no.
I hope you guys
Um,
are loving this.
I'm just trying to keep her off her.
Yeah, do your thing. It's totally
Lucy,
okay.
please lie down. Let me just get her to lie
Yeah,
down.
handle that. We're good.
I'm so sorry.
This is what real life looks like.
Go to bed. Lie down. No. Lie down. Lie down. Okay. I think we're good. You're catching some real Lucy, go to bed. Lie down. Go to your bed. Lie down. Lie down. Good girl. Okay, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. You're great with her.
Anyway, no. Stop that. Lie down. Lie down. Lie down.
This is good advice for all of us.
This
Just to chill out
There's
and
no
lie
one
down.
out there. Lie down. Luke, just lie down. Lie down. lie down, lie down, please. Um, so anyway, so just luck, I think. I think fortunately here's your edit point. Uh, I think I was just lucky that they thought of me and my band Valley Lodge, and I'm super grateful, and I think it's such a great show. So
Yeah.
it's nice. I'd be thrilled if uh, any show other than maybe Tucker Carlson or something. Obviously I wouldn't allow something like that to happen, but um,
Obviously.
honored to have any show other than something like that use
Yeah.
one of our songs. But the fact that it's such a great show, I'm super psyched and extra
Yeah.
grateful for.
It's
And
where I
knock
get a
on
lot
wood.
of my news. Oh, sorry to interrupt.
Pardon?
I didn't mean to interrupt. What was the last thing you said?
Oh, I said knock on wood. They stay on the air for
Yeah.
uh, the rest for 30 more years.
Woohoo! You heard it here first.
Yes, I hope.
Well, I've become just recently started watching it again for the first time in years. For some reason, it's just really become like that's my news source. I try to find positive news source, real news source, and like keep it light. That's that and some
Yeah.
updates from New York Times, and that way I can check in with my news or not. But I want to acknowledge a couple different things. So first of all, it's great that your friends there at the show, John and Liz. Did you say
Liz, yeah.
Liz? Yeah, took the time to listen to your music. It's not
Yeah,
always that
yeah,
our
because they
friends
could
even
have been
listen to our
like,
music.
let's see what Katy Perry has or whoever.
Yeah, yeah. So that's really cool. So if you want to hear some of Valley Lodge, you could just watch the John Oliver show, but you
There
should
you
go
go.
check it out. Where you guys stream, you're everywhere, right?
We're on all the streaming things, yeah.
Yeah. So you're a musician, comedian, author too.
Hmm.
What have you written?
I'm just finishing my fourth book right now. It's due at the end of the year, so it's beyond crunch time. I've never been so down to the wire, I don't think, with finishing a book. But yeah, my first two books were essay collections, Tasteful Nudes and Dave Hill Doesn't Live Here Anymore. My last book, my third book, was called Parking the Moose, and it's about Canada, basically. Just I spent a couple years going back and forth through, going to Canada and checking out different areas and writing about it, and it was super fun. My grandfather was from Canada, so that was sort of the inspiration of the book because he, growing up, would always tell my siblings and me that Canada was the greatest country in the world, which is obviously like not what you're taught growing up in America. We're always taught that America's the best. So I grew up with a totally different, because you're like, well, my grandfather's right about everything. So
Yeah.
I was just like, no, Canada's the best country. I thought that when I was a kid. So finally, in my adult life, I fortunately was given the opportunity by my publisher to go uh, just go everywhere in Canada and
Hmm.
see what was what, So it was
Hmm.
awesome because I'd really wanted to explore Canada and see, all these places that I'd heard about. Um, growing up being a huge hockey fan, I would hear about like, Clark Gillies is from was from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, and Bobby Clark is from Flin Flon, Manitoba. Clark Gillies died. That's why I keep
Yeah.
switching the verbs. Um, so
Where did you grow
all
up?
these amazingly named, weird sounding places. I didn't
Yeah.
get to Flin Flon, but I did get to I visited a lot of Canada. So that was the third book, and the new book, sort of one notch over from that, is about hockey loosely. So, which is
Can you tell us the title?
I don't know the title yet.
Okay. Ooh,
We're kind of
exciting.
that's another crunch time. I know what the title might be, but I don't want to say for fear of being wrong.
Okay. Well, we'll
Yeah.
wait. That's an exciting thing to check out. So right now, the most recent book that we can read is Park in the Moose.
Parking the Moose. Yeah.
Parking the
Um,
Moose. Ooh, I like that even more.
yeah. So
Parking the Moose. I'm
I recommend all of the books, but I think, I think if someone likes me and how I write, um, which, I struggle with, why anyone would like either of those things sometimes. Speaking of mental health, I think they'll like the new book, and I'm
Hmm.
trusting that'll be the case. I hope.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, we'll find out. I always
we'll
say to
find out.
artists, right? I always say to artists too. It's for the people who will like it, and for the people who don't, fuck them.
Yeah, fuck them.
It's not for
Exactly
them.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. I don't think anything I do is like meant. I'd be thrilled if everyone liked it, but none of it is meant for. It's for anyone, but not everyone. I guess I
Hmm.
should say.
I like that. Where did you grow up, Dave?
I grew up in University Heights, Ohio, which is a east side suburb of Cleveland. And yeah, pretty like, you know, just kind of nice, comfortable suburb. Uh, very, I don't know. Most people like you meet in New York or LA or whatever who are from Cleveland are from kind of the cluster of towns that I'm from, at least in my experience.
Well,
Not
two of
everybody,
my
but
best
most.
friends, Rob and Robbie, my bandmate and my best friend from college, they're from Dayton and Columbus. So I meet a lot of
Oh,
people
okay.
from from
Further
those
south.
areas.
A world away. It's a world away.
World
But
away.
yeah, I know plenty of Dayton and more Columbus folks. But
Yeah. So you grew up
yeah,
in near Cleveland
yeah.
in a small rural town.
No, not a rural town at
I mean
all.
suburban.
Yeah. No, it's like very, in fact, now it's considered almost like urban, which is completely ridiculous. Just because Cleveland, people just keep going further and further out, over the years. And I was, where I grew up was considered like, oh, that's the suburbs. And now I'm told that people think of it as like the urban ring because it's kind of like just on the edge
Hmm.
of the city. It's, just a few handful of miles away.
Yeah.
So,
And what was your life like there when you were growing up?
I mean, it's pretty normal. Like, I, four siblings, two parents that were together until my mom died. And, uh, but for the purposes of, uh, your show, plenty of mental illness.
Yeah.
Um,
Where were you
uh,
in the pecking order of siblings?
I was second youngest, so but like Irish Catholic or mostly Irish Catholic, fully Catholic, mostly Irish. Um, but yeah, not a lot of. I mean, I don't know. One of my sisters, I think, likes to paint a portrait. Like we had a lot of messed up things, but I don't know. I mean, I, I, I think relative to most people, it's just kind of a nice upbringing and very privileged. Not like a rich kid, but I definitely never wanted for anything, you know, other than maybe like uh stuff I didn't need, a second guitar, things like that.
Yeah, of
But
course.
now in my adult life, I'm, now I have too many guitars. So really in my adult life, that's the only thing I've really just sort of done what my inner 15-year-old would have wanted, which is to have way too many guitars. And so there we go. It's the only thing that's
Awesome.
changed, really.
Well, when you mentioned there's plenty of mental illness around you growing up, what did you mean by that? Or was
Well,
that present?
I think, I wasn't conscious of it growing up, but, when in my early 20s, I mean, like a lot of people, I think statistically anyway, that's when a lot of people start to become conscious of mental, maybe depressive episodes. But that's like,
Hmm.
I started struggling with OCD, like clinical OCD, like actual OCD, not like, I should say with OCD, like when people are like, "Oh, I'm so OCD. I have to have my kitchen clean." When people talk like that, I'm like, "Fuck you. You like stuff clean. That's not you don't have a disorder. Like this disorder is horrible." So I
Mm.
had it. I don't really struggle with it anymore. But I had that and like sort of, yeah, anxiety, clinical depression. And it was, when I was about early 20s is when, it became where I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't, I wasn't eating. Lost like a, ton of weight very quickly. And I didn't know what was going on. And then I started talking to doctors, who were like, because I started to think I had like different diseases, the things that when you're mentally ill, like you start thinking something else is wrong.
Or
And
everything's
doctors would be
wrong.
like, they were like, you should see a therapist. And I was like, why? Why won't you address that I have whatever it was that week, Uh, and so when I started being conscious of that and recognizing that, that's when like two of my sisters were like, "Oh, we've been struggling with this for years and, we've seen therapists, we're on medication." But being from, you know, I think just my background or like in my family where you didn't really talk about that sort of stuff. It was hidden, it's like treated like a private thing that I didn't know that my siblings had any experience with, so it was like I it was, when I found out that my older sister, I remember like, oh, that's why, you know, you, I remember my sister was acting really, you know, shouldn't say she was acting weird, but that was my perception of it when I was like in high school. She was acting really weird in college and she was really upset and I didn't know what was going on. And it was because she was experiencing this stuff, for the first
Mm.
time.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, that sort of became like a long, in my 20s, just being conscious of it and sort of like a long, sort of ongoing thing that I deal with still. But, once I started doing it, then I started recognizing things in my childhood where I was like, oh, that was really messed up. My thinking, I would get so upset about certain things, that, and like I was like, oh, this was like anxiety that I didn't know I had my whole life. And I think my mother struggled with it, a lot of anxiety and probably a lot of my extended family, like, there's alcoholism and things like that. And so it's things I wasn't really conscious of when I was younger. And then once, but now, depression, mental health is still like I think in a way it's a struggle for everybody. I know some people that don't seem to struggle with it and will say that they don't struggle with it. And like, I think that's amazing.
Yeah, I'm
And
fascinated by that.
yeah, like I have friends who are
Yeah.
like, no, I don't really, nope. And but for me, it's like an ongoing thing that, I've made progress and, but it's sort of like having a bum knee or something where you're maybe susceptible to injury, like I still get in ruts, uh, that where I'm like, oh, how did I wind up back here? And then I think about it like, well, I've been on tour, I haven't been sleeping, I've been drinking probably a little too much, I'm stressed out, all the things just sort of like where you're like, oh yeah, of course, that's and here I am, in this dark place again. And then but then you learn and you know how to get out of it, maybe more. No, or I view it as, I'm able to view it like as, oh, it's raining, like. But when before you learn anything, as I'm sure you know about mental health, you kind of, it would be like if it were raining and you thought, oh, it's going to be raining forever. Or it's like if you had a
Yeah.
cold and you're like, I'm going to feel this way forever. I think that's how mental health problems feel before you know what's going on. You're like, oh, I guess this is my reality so now I know. And it's hard because you go like, well, I don't want to go running. I don't want to meditate. I don't want to do this or that, and but you do it and then you're like, oh, I'm in a better spot now.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an ongoing thing. And I don't know, there's windows where I think I've beaten it. I think it's over. And then you go like, oh, like I really thought, and you can cut me off at any point, because I can ramble about this stuff all day.
This is great.
But I started, and I know it's almost a cliche at this point, with according to some people, but in like January 2020, I started microdosing psilocybin, LSD, and peyote with
All at
with
the
some
same time.
guidance. Not all at the same time every day, but
Mm-hmm.
sometimes all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
With guidance from someone,
Mm-hmm.
because I was in this pattern where I was just like, how am I back down in this place again? After all these years, you go, how am I down here? And I started talking to this woman who, was, uh, would sort of guide you through microdosing and things. And she was really helpful. And it's one of those things like Bader Meinhof syndrome. Like as soon as I started thinking about this and reading about it, it started to be like, I was doing a show and this comedian came off stage and he's like, "Hey, was I okay on stage? Like, I'm worried that I was like a little spacey because I'm microdosing." And I was like, it was almost like he was sent to talk to me because I hadn't talked to anyone about it. I hadn't even
Yeah.
said it out loud.
Yeah.
And this guy just sat down next to me and started talking about it.
Mm.
And then like what, a guy, one of my bandmates was like, brought it up randomly. He's like, "Oh, my girlfriend and I are seeing this woman." And they connect me with this woman. And I started doing it, and it was just like the slightest shift. I sort of liken it to, I don't know if you have experience with it at all, but uh,
With
microdosing.
plant medicine, I don't have experience with microdosing. I have experience with some heavy dosing. and
Oh, okay, yeah. That's
in
I want.
in very, I mean, in controlled environments with people who I really really respect and admire, who this was passed on from their
Yeah.
people. So yeah, but I've one of them actually said to me, a shaman said to me, I was telling him about the antidepressants I was on, and he invited me to a sweat with him, and they. I said, I can't participate in the plant medicine part because I'm on an antidepressant, and there's a pretty clear scientific research for potential serotonin overdose toxicity.
Hmm.
So you've got to be really careful if you're on medications. They usually suggest you wean off. But
Yeah.
so I was telling the shaman, like, I would, as much as I would, I'm interested in doing another ceremony with you and sitting with you. And at this point, I'm just biologically not able to. And he said, why? And I said, oh, I'm on this medication. He said, oh, why don't you just come drink ayahuasca with me? And just, we can do some microdosing. I can just
Hmm.
microdose psilocybin. And I was like, well, I don't know if it's that simple, dude. Like my brain, I was just like, I don't know. I think I'm not really in the space to talk about this right now.
Hmm.
because to me it didn't feel like the science was out there. But the more I've heard about it and I've talked to people about it, and I all for whatever works. I mean, much rather be using something from the earth than from
Yeah.
a factory, right? So I really, and I've been off of medications for years too, but yeah, so that's sort of where I am now. So it's interesting to hear about your journey. So it sounds like you said there's a little bit of a shift, and I interrupted you at the point where you said, and but you kind of liken it to, and then you asked me, I'm not sure if you've done it before. So what do you
Oh,
liken it to?
I sort of liken it to, well, first of all, like everyone when I started talking with people about it and reading about it, no one was like, it's awesome. No one was like using superlatives
Mm-hmm.
because I'm very wary of superlatives. When anyone uses superlatives about anything, I tend to like resist it right away. If they
Hmm.
say a TV show is amazing, I'm less inclined to watch it. I'll be like, I'm gonna pump the brakes. Like I almost think you should only be able to use the word amazing maybe like 5 times in your life to describe, because how many things are truly amazing? So that, with
That's a great
with
reflection.
microdosing, like no one was saying like it's amazing. People were like, oh, it was just a slight shift that I needed, or this kind of uh they would just kind of talk about it in sort of like reasonable terms, which made me sort of be like, okay. So, and that's what it was. It was sort of like, I sort of liken it, what this, now I'm finally getting back to it. When you ever ride like bumper cars at the amusement park when you're a kid?
I just did it again a few weeks ago.
Yeah, so when you get like stuck in the corner and you're just stuck and you can't get out, and like the attendant
Everyone's
needs to
coming
come
for you.
over and like yank you out.
Oh, then
And
yeah.
then you're like freewheeling again. You're crashing into your friends. That's what I sort of like in microdosing too. It's like you're stuck, and then someone kind of just gives you a little yank out of the rut, and then
Hmm.
and it's just the little thing you needed. And so it was very helpful. And then I was doing great. And then with the pandemic, I think after a few months of it, I just started to really go downhill. And then I was talking to my therapist, though, who I hadn't talked to in a while. I kind of had an emergency phone session with him. And he he said, you sound amazing. Like you sound better than I've ever heard you sound in all the time I've known you. But based on what you're saying, it just sounds like you're now upset about, you're troubled by the real world instead of, just your subconscious. And
Hmm.
um he's like, so you're not in your head anymore. You're just upset about what's happening. I was upset about, obvious things, the pandemic, and
Yeah.
I was really anxious about uh the election, the 2020 election. Probably wouldn't shock anyone to know that I'm not a fan of Trump or anyone on that side of things. And so I was very sort of anxious. Anyway, but I think so my mood was not great, but I think I think the microdosing was very effective. I haven't really gotten back to like that initial blast I had with it the first few months of it. But um just knowing that I was capable of it, of knowing that it was the first time where I was like, in years and years, where I was like, I think I might be capable of enjoying life. And for a very long time, I've really felt like the best case scenario is just feeling like I have my head just above water. That's as good
Hmm.
as it will ever be. And that in that time when I was doing that, I was like, I think it can be much better than that. So, um, And interestingly, like when I was just kind of even before I got into it or started doing it, I talked to my therapist and he really was like, "Yeah, the science is there. I think you should give it a shot." I talked to
Mm.
another therapist friend and she was like, "Yeah, totally. Go for it." And I even talked to my psychiatrist, who prescribes the medications, and I thought would just be like, "No, no, 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 no." And he was like, "Well, I'm aware of the science." He pumped the brakes a little bit, and he's like, "Why don't we get together and talk about it?" And at that point, I was just knew that I wanted to try it, so
Hmm.
I never met with him about it. I was
Hmm.
like, "I'm just gonna do it." So,
Well, thank you for
um,
being so honest with us and kind of taking us on that journey. I definitely appreciate that you said and I encourage any of our listeners to definitely consult with professionals and your team. And if you do it and participate in plant medicine, to really do it with people who are experienced with it and
yeah,
who you
yeah.
feel
I mean,
safe and really trust.
yeah, I think that's yeah important, obviously, and like I was, I have. It was a big thing for me because the reason, well, going back to mental health,
Hmm.
I I've always kind of had like a after school, or I don't have it anymore, but I always had like a huge fear and hang up about drugs, any sort of like quote unquote illegal drugs. Growing up, I was like, oh my gosh, I just thought I just bought into everything you're taught as a
From
kid,
the
especially like growing up.
say no people.
Oh, I fully and
Used to
weirdly
come to
like
our
my
school with the suitcase of like, this is what LSD looks like. This is what crack cocaine looks like.
yeah,
Did you
I
ever
thought
have
I
that in
just
school?
oh yeah, and
The dare.
I totally bought into that 1000% as a kid. I have no idea why because my siblings didn't and my parents never said a word about drugs.
Hmm.
So it was just something that somehow got past the goalie with me, and, if I can bring hockey into it,
Yeah.
uh, and
That's why I asked where
so
you grew up because we didn't have ice hockey anywhere near me in Tennessee. We were definitely not talking about Canada.
oh,
It's
yeah.
like
No, I can
you
well,
would
I
dare
can't
talk
see
about
Canada,
that
but
down there.
I'm looking out at Lake Erie right now.
Oh, beautiful.
So,
So you were
you know
there. You were really feeling drugged. You were buying into the drugs are bad.
yeah, and that was something I got over by the time
I
I
mean, you were
got
also
to
playing rock and roll, so was that like that must have conflicted at some point?
I mean, it all conflicted very quickly because when I was 14, when I started high school, I was playing hockey and not to brag, but I was a freshman on the varsity team. So it was like me and two other freshmen and then everyone, 20 juniors and seniors or whatever, however many. And like I don't know if it is anymore, but at the time hockey was like a big stoner sport. So
Oh, how
like
interesting! I
all
didn't
of a
know
sudden
that.
like, kids would be coming into practice like smelling of weed, and I was terrified of it, but I was a freshman and they were like hazing us so hard already that I knew if I showed any sort of like weakness, like being upset by, them smelling like weed, I knew that they would seize upon it. So I got over my, anxiety or fear of drugs like boom, like in 1 second. Cause I was like, you don't have time for this bullshit. You don't have time. You cannot be visibly afraid of something because they're going to mock you. And
Mm.
so you're,
So
they're
you
going
learned to immediately shut down how you were feeling, so that you
to,
didn't basically get bullied.
yeah, yeah, I would have been bullied for it. Absolutely. So, and then, by the time I got to college, I think it was mostly weed and stuff at that point. So everything I was hearing about pod, I was like, well, I just feel that way already. Everything you're describing, I feel that way. So I anyway, blah blah blah. So I all by way of saying I had like slight hangups about like using anything other than prescription or over the counter drugs. I just had this like residual hang up. So for me to like go like, oh, I'm gonna do mushrooms and LSD and peyote, going from like nothing, drinking only to that was like, okay. I was a little nervous.
Hmm.
And I actually tried to do like a clinical study at, a prominent university in New York City. God, how could
Oh,
you
I
possibly
remember.
figure out
They
which
used
one
to
of my
have all
talk?
those like come take a study like on the subway trains. There were always ads for like come
Yeah.
sign up for this study, right?
Yeah, so I signed up for one at this prominent New York City School of Higher Learning
Which will
Medical
remain
Center,
unnamed.
and I qualified for it. And then so I was like, well, how will I know? Do you tell me whether or not, because they're going to give, there's a control group, and then there's the group who actually gets to microdose. And I was like, how, do you tell me which group I'm in at any point? And they said, someone who answered the phone should not have been on the phone. They were like, well, most people know like pretty quickly whether they're getting the real thing or not. And I was like, why would you tell me that? Like, that's like, you're not supposed to do that. And so I was like,
Ruin the control from before it started.
yeah, so I was like, well, I knew that I really just wanted it and I didn't want to mess around. So I was like, not going to I didn't do the study. I just found someone, because, that's kind of where it's at right now. You're either doing a study or you're just finding someone in their apartment, because that's where it is right now.
Yeah.
And it doesn't I mean, the science is the science, and the science is there. I think the reason it's not moving along faster is because the pharmaceutical companies don't know how they're going to monetize it yet.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, they're totally in control. Yeah.
Yeah, so until the
I'm sure
pharmaceutical
they're very
companies,
threatened.
yeah, until they figure out
Yeah.
how they're going to fuck us uh, with
With
it, and
this, yeah.
it's not going to be available.
Yeah,
It's
I've been
like,
worried about them getting hold of cannabis as that's becoming, legalized because it's helped so many people. But if pharmaceutical companies just, I never know, like, are they gonna tweak it and suddenly it's not gonna be, useful anymore? Who knows?
yeah, I mean, it's yeah, it's the reality. I mean, that's just what happens. And it's even like CBD. There's like a lot of, with our dog, we wanted to try CBD with our dog for her knee, which she ultimately had surgery on. But at one stage we're talking about it, but like, even the vet will not even comment on it because
Hmm.
it's not in their money. They're not making money on it. So they're
Wow,
just like, oh, we
interesting.
don't know. We don't know. So they
Yeah,
wouldn't, you know, so even that, something like that is like still kind of the Wild West.
yeah. Wow. Well, you've mentioned that depression was, part of your life in your early 20s and off and on now. What are the tools that you've found that have helped you with it? And is comedy one of those things that helps?
In a way, I would say so, because comedy, um, I would say being on stage is like, especially more so with comedy than music, is for me being on stage, you know, or acting, doing on camera work. Uh, those two things are, I always feel, so present and in the moment. I know those are like phrases you hear to, beaten to death, but like
Well, when you have thousands of people staring at you or hundreds of people
You're
staring at
being
you,
too kind.
it's like, oh, hey.
Yeah, you can't. But I will say with music, it's less so because, especially if you're not singing, when you're singing, it's a little harder. But like when you're just playing guitar, not diminishing that, it's awesome. Um, you can still go like, oh shoot, forgot to pick up my laundry. Like, oh shoot, do we have beer in the dressing room? I forget. You can think about you have little moments where you can be out of it.
You with,
Um,
yeah.
but with comedy, you can't. I could probably count on one hand how many times in 17 years I think of doing this, of doing comedy, like where I didn't feel totally connected to the moment, being on stage. They're like, and it's when that happens, it's just so rare, and uh it's because something else is fucked up, and you know, so in that way, um, 'cause obviously, like being present is a huge thing that, there's whole, Eckhart Tolle and all that, and I mean, the interesting thing about it, like, have you read his books at all, Eckhart Tolle, or do you
Yeah,
watch
the
his
power
videos?
of now.
Yeah, so like,
Yeah, and I've watched some of his videos. Yeah.
there's like stuff that he was sort of like indirectly like among the reasons I was curious about microdosing because like I was reading that and like my friend Damien Eccles wrote this book, High Magic, which is like coming at it from a totally different perspective, but really not. Like it's kind of all the same. It's like a wagon wheel. Everything's leading you to this same, s- you know, everything, all roads lead to Rome or whatever the saying is with Rome, because it's a wagon wheel city. Um,
Yeah.
you know, everything I was everything was pointing me towards microdosing because it's like ego death. And I mean, almost I woke up in the middle of the night and I was thinking like I'm having a dark night of the soul. And then I as I often do, like when I have thoughts like this where of this phrase that obviously I didn't invent or term I didn't invent, I was like, I'm just gonna get up and what the fuck does that even mean? Where does that come from? I know what it means, but where does it come from?
Yeah.
And I started reading about it, and then you read about it, and it's like it starts talking about ego death, and even within that, it talks about psychedelics, and so I was just like, oh, this is all this same shit. Eckhart Tolle, Damien Eccles, uh, ego death, being present, which I've been doing like transcendental meditation, which I work is helpful to me, but I don't say like, oh, one form of meditation is better than another. I took, like transcendental meditation is maybe prohibitive for some people because there's like a substantial fee to like learning it. But with that, I just thought if it works, if it's effective, if it works for me, the money will be totally worth it. And if it doesn't work, I'll write about it or get some material about it out of it and it'll be worth it in that way. So I was just like, fuck it. I'll spend whatever, I can't remember, it's like 700 bucks, 1,000 bucks or something. So, I mean, obviously that's going to limit some people aren't going to, but I do think there's plenty of free meditations that where you don't have an upfront fee to learning it. Um,
Yeah. So meditation is part of your what are some of the parts of your self-care today that you really count on and depend on aside from microdosing? Um,
um,
what
I
other
mean,
things
just
do you
the obvious ones are exercise. Um,
what do you do
to
for
look at me,
exercise?
what's that?
What do you do for exercise?
I mean, I clearly not much to look, looking at me, you were like, well,
Well,
no,
I can
you don't
only
do
see
much.
kind of like from the chest up, so I'm not really,
I'm super ripped. I'm super
Yeah.
ripped. No, I go running. I ride my bike, but neither very aggressively. I run very slowly. I ride my bike like most of the time no faster than like a 10-year-old could run. You know, any kid could catch me pretty easily on my bike. And
For better or for worse.
I do those things, and then I throw the do kettlebell swings. Um, even if I'm having like an anxious sort of like feeling, I can go swing the kettlebell 50 times and I'm like, "Oh, I feel better," you know?
Hmm.
So like you can do exercise and I think just doing that regularly, it's like I like riding a bike's pretty easy, but running sucks. Kettlebell is no fun. But having done it, I always feel better doing any of that stuff. So just reminding myself like, running 3, 4, 5 miles is gonna suck. I'll hate it, but I know that I'll have such a better day. Like
After.
I started running in like 2010.
Hmm.
I was on tour in Europe. I was playing guitar with my friend Walter Schreifels, and he's a big runner. And my mom had just died, and we were like, we were on this tour in Europe, and it's like drinking a lot and eating a ton of food, and I just like, I really grieving my mother, and I thought like if I just stay the course of doing nothing and drinking and eating like crazy, I'm gonna come home in such a worse state than I left in. So I just started going running with him, and it changed my life. Because I'd never really gone running like where, because he would run for like an hour straight and like around these cities in Europe where I didn't know my way around. So I was like, I guess I have to keep running because he knows how to get back to the club. I have no idea. And so I went from not running at all to running like an hour every day. And I felt so good. Like I remember being in like Munich, Germany. Um, I guess I just could have said Munich because most people would know what that's in Germany. And I remember like sitting there and had a couple beers. It's like 1 in the morning. And I remember thinking like, I feel the run more than I feel the beer. I feel the run from like 6 o'clock more than I feel the couple beers I had at midnight. Um, and I just got so into it. I started waking up early before we'd go to the next city, and I would go for a morning run, and then we would do sound check, and I'd run again. And I was doing this in really shitty New Balance shoes that were not, they were just like fashion fake running shoes, not real running shoes. And I couldn't walk after 2 weeks of this, like literally every step. And then I went and got like proper running shoes. I've been running ever since.
Oh,
So
wow.
anyway, just obvious things, exercise, meditation, um, and for me, I love beer, wine, whiskey. I can't drink like I used to when I was a pretty young thing in my old age. But even now, having, I can have a couple. If I have more than a couple, like literally two, it's like I'm starting the day from a bad place. And so I really have to like, it's delicious, but I really have to like I have to pump the brakes on that and
Yeah.
it's fun and stuff, but like I just have to remind myself like, oh, an hour of fun is not worth 23 shitty hours.
Hmm.
So I still drink, but I just try to like not go too crazy, pick my battles.
Yeah.
um, but I don't know. I guess that's my vice. That and like ice cream. But
Exercise, meditation, alcohol, and ice cream.
No, I would say the alcohol and ice cream
And
or those are things that don't help, but they're enjoyable and so I'd
yeah.
probably be better off without either one of those things. But yeah, I would just say
Well, I think
and just
moderation is okay too. To not allow ourselves like something like that at all. Especially if you exercise and you're, eating mindfully. I think it's moderation. I believe is so important than beating ourselves up for it.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, like because I'm always like I tend to go to a place I'm doing something wrong. What am I doing wrong? And yeah, my therapist when I was seeing him was like, you don't have a drinking problem, assuming you're being honest with me, like what you're telling me your habits are, like you just enjoy like he's like just don't you know don't have four or five and which when I was 20 in my 20s 30s that wouldn't beat me up too much, but now grandpa can't handle it. I can't
Well, I've got
anymore.
just a couple. Thank you so much for your time today, and I really appreciate everyone who's listening as part of this conversation. I'd love to
I'm
know.
sorry for rambling so much. It's
Oh
just
no,
kind
it's
of my
it's great.
default
I
state.
love. It's beautiful. I mean, I really, make this space for every guest to just be themselves. So I really appreciate you being yourself today and sharing yourself so openly with us. And I'd love to hear from any of the listeners what's resonating. And please remember to subscribe. Dave, before we go, I've got a couple more questions. But for people who want
Sure.
to follow you, I mean, I think it's pretty. You could probably just Google Dave Hill and we'll find out. But your music, is this your handle, Mr. Dave Hill,
Yeah,
on
at
social
Mr. Dave
media?
Hill. That's me on Instagram, mostly just and TikTok though.
Mhm.
I don't Instagram's really. And I was that was my handle on Twitter, but I'm banned for life from Twitter. So we just
Why?
we're at this point for the best
Yeah.
as the ship sinks.
Yes. Um, do you want to tell us about that, or maybe another, maybe for the next episode?
It's a whole other
Yeah.
whole I mean, I can tell you just quickly. I just Trump supporters would like say mean things to me and I would respond with mother jokes. And I guess they did that thing where a bunch of people were, they will
Report you.
report an account all, and so I got banned. And people are now like, oh, like, are you gonna come back now that uh any you know Kanye and Trump and whoever awful people can come back? Are you gonna try to come back? And I don't think I will, because I really think I mean, social media, I've been talking about mental health. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really, there's things I like about it. Like I like that. I like when you can connect with people and like, um, and I'm sorry, I'm watching my dog lie down here. Okay, you're good. Um, I I I like that you can connect with people all over the world. And you know, I went to Kenya. I forget if I mentioned it when we were talking about. I went to Kenya and played hockey for my book with the one team there, and without social media, I don't know that I would have been able to connect with them. So I like social media for that sort of thing, but in terms of you know the rest of it, of going on and be like, oh wait, you're shooting a movie, I'm not shooting a movie. Oh, you're having an amazing dinner with all these one I'm just sitting here with my what it's just like a bad feelings machine, social media,
Hmm.
with occasional good things.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry. This
No,
is my
no.
problem. I just go ranting,
This
not
is. I
ranting,
really
rambling.
appreciate that. That you said social media is like a bad feelings machine, and with some good sprinkled in there. And so,
Enough
I
good to
could
keep you
I could
coming
relate
back.
to that. Yeah, right. Do you have any limits on your social media use for your own mental health?
I try to. I mean, I I I generally try to avoid scrolling at all. Like I'll allow myself to look at the first thing that shows up in my feed, and sometimes I'll give in to scrolling, but scrolling, eventually you're just going to land on something that upsets you. So it's just a bad thing to do. And but for time, if you just say no scrolling, and I'll just post. So I tend to post and I'll reply to messages and comments, but I try not to do anything more than that because it's a time suck, and bad feelings suck. And even though there's bad feelings that will come of the things I just mentioned, because you post them and you're like, oh, why aren't more people liking? Why, I'm just stating obvious things, but
Yeah, yeah,
oh, this video, I thought it was really good. Why didn't more people watch it? And
yeah.
this and that, and you know, I don't know. I think anything, hang out with people you love, and dogs and cats, and eat some good snacks, and those are the only things that I recommend.
That's beautiful. Well, my last question was going to be that, like, what are the well, let me ask you this. If you could give, I love to ask all my guests this, but if you could give the world one gift today, what might you give us?
Well, I mean, just as I was talking about it earlier, I would say, and this is on Netflix, which a lot of people have. You can find this. Go watch the movie Disco Dancer.
Okay.
Or I would just say watch Pee-wee's Big Adventure,
Oh my God.
which I recommend as just like,
That was one of my all-time favorite movies growing up.
it's still one of my all-time favorites. And I always say if someone doesn't like that movie from 5 years old to 105, whatever, if you don't like that movie, we probably can't be friends. Um, but there's a movie Disco Dancer, this Bollywood movie that's so amazing. My friend Anuval Paul turned me on to it, a comedian in Mumbai. I asked him to recommend some Indian movies, and he said, "This is the only one you need." And it's on Netflix and other services, and it's just the most ridiculous, just absurd movie you'll ever see, maybe. And you have to some people but it is polarizing. Like my girlfriend lasted about 10 minutes.
Got it.
But that's my gift
So keep
to
my
anyone.
expectations low, but don't miss it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just it's a Bollywood movie, so there's going to be like a lot of songs and stuff. I mean, if and it's just going to be long, and but it's
So
not for everybody.
if you could give the world one gift today, it would be Disco Dancer.
I would say watch Disco Dancer, or just get a dog if you don't have one already, or a cat if you're a cat person.
And
I'm
if
allergic, so
got it. And if everyone had like an animal they loved and everyone had seen the movie Disco Dancer, what do you see us all doing or doing differently?
like what should we do, or what would be the positive thing that
What would
happens?
the world look like if we all had like, those animals and we all knew Disco Dancer?
I mean, probably a lot of problems would just go away, I would think, because I mean, if it would just first of all, I mean, Disco Dancer. No, I could talk about that all day, but I think I don't know, there would just be a shift. It's like there's talk, group meditation, they say there's like a power to that. I think there's a power to everyone having a dog
Hmm.
and watching Disco Dancer. Cuz like dogs are like anyone that has a dog, there's hope for them. Or anyone that likes dogs. Like I may disagree with someone's beliefs or politics or whatever, but if they have a dog, I know we have a strong connection on some level,
Hmm.
you know?
Now, this is interesting because I have a few friends that don't like dogs. And, how do you feel about people who don't like dogs?
They just don't, my girlfriend thought she didn't like dogs, and then we got a dog, and we got a big dog. Well, what turned out to be a pretty big dog. And she claimed she didn't like, and now, she loves dogs. So,
So maybe
I
they
mean,
just don't know yet.
yeah, you just don't know yet.
You love
Um,
dogs, you just don't know it.
yeah, it's like, and cats, it's not the same because, I mean, people can be allergic to dogs, but cat allergies are more prevalent. And like, so people are always like, well, you can take medication before you come over my house. And I'm like, or I could just not come over.
Yeah, we can meet somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good for you. That sounds like a healthy boundary. So, loving pets plus disco dancer equals
Yeah.
happiness. I'm gonna
I
check
think,
this movie out. I'm
I think,
still debating right now whether or not I'm gonna bring it out as our movie at my Friendsgiving tonight. I don't know how. I'm interested to see how I'll go over with this crew, but I'm gonna
I
tell
think it'll
them
go over very well.
great, and if they like it, tell them to talk to Dave Hill.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and if they do, please go thank Dave Hill.
Yeah. Yeah. Or
Yeah.
thank Anaval Paul who turned me onto it.
Okay. Cool. Anna Valpal. Okay. Well, Dave, thank you so much for your time today and for being so
Thank you.
vulnerable and honest with us. I really hope that it helps people, and I've enjoyed it, and I'm really grateful for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great
Thanks
to
for having
connect with
me.
you, man. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was good
yeah.
to
So
see you.
nice to see you.
And I just had an idea as I was thinking, like, our bands haven't played live in a while, and maybe we could get a show together in one of our
Yeah,
areas in the
I would
near
love it.
future. Of
Yeah.
with our powers combined, maybe do another
Yes.
live show.
I love it. I'm in.
Yeah. All right. Nice. Well, have a great day. Thank you again, everyone. Please
Thank
follow
you.
Dave Hill. Look out for his new book.
Look out for it.
Look out
Fall
for it.
2023.
All right, dudes, you're getting well. Thank you. Take
Thank
care.
you.